Okay, so guys, this is a quick video about rumors regarding Whitney and Bobby's relationship. But I want to say that a lot of these rumors are probably going to make Bobby look bad because this segment is pulled from a Whitney Houston scandal video that's actually a private member video. So when I researched a lot of these rumors, they came from people that were looking at the story from Whitney's point of view. But maybe Bobby will be redeemed when we get to his scandal video, because that one will most likely be a public video. But anyway, let's get to it.
Now, I don't know if Whitney and Bobby just weren't meant to be together, or if it was people in this world that were sabotaging them, or if it was people not from this world, spirits or something, that was sabotaging them. But clearly something was going on. So listen at this disclaimer so we can go ahead and get to the scandalous tea.
All of my videos are for entertainment purposes. Everything in them is rumor, gossip, and scandal that I get from books, word of mouth, on TV. Let's get to it.
The year was 1989, and Bobby Brown had left the group New Edition and was now a solo artist. And he had just finished performing at the Soul Train Award and was now standing backstage getting bumped upside the back of his head, or he was sitting in the audience getting bumped upside his head. Whichever version of the story you want to believe. Regardless of where he was, after a while, this bumping upside the back of his head started to annoy him. And so he jerked around with a sort of attitude. But when he looked into those big, beautiful brown eyes and that gorgeous smiling face, all Bobby Brown could say was, hey, you know you keep bumping me, right? And that's when Whitney says, I know, with a smirk. And so Bobby, sure enough cheesing now, proceeds to ask, well, let me ask you something. If I was to ask you on a date, would you say yes? And Whitney bursts out in a long, hard laugh and she says, yes, of course I would. And from that moment on, Whitney Houston and Bobby Brown were never out of contact. If they were not together physically, they were always on the phone with each other. If they weren't on the phone with each other, they were always on each other's mind. The next big event that anybody saw them at was Whitney's 26th birthday party. She invited Bobby to come. After that, they linked up at the BB and CC Winans concert. And everything with Whitney and Bobby's relationship was absolute gold. It was very cool at first because Whitney's team thought he was going to be a passing fling. You know, they had seen a few of those already. Jermaine Jackson, Eddie Murphy, Randall Cunningham. You know, they saw that. So they just thought Bobby Brown was going to be another fun time and then he was going to be out of the door. But then when Whitney started to float the idea, and not only float the idea, she almost demanded this idea that Bobby join her 1991 tour, that is when Clive Davis started to really perk up his eyes and ears to this Bobby Brown character and what he had going on with Whitney. And right from the beginning, Clive Davis didn't like it. And because he didn't like it, this caused Whitney's family not to like it. And it is rumored from the very beginning, both parties sought to break Whitney and Bobby up. They would tell Whitney that she was too classy for Bobby. Allegedly, Clive would tell Whitney personally that Bobby would end up ruining her. And this coming from Clive allegedly was not so much of him looking out for Whitney. It's that he had money invested in her, first of all. And then secondly, he saw Bobby as a threat to his control over Whitney. So that is when Whitney was said to have decided that no more. You know what I'm saying? She started pulling away from Clive Davis's control and pretty much having her man's back, doing what Bobby said for her to do. And this was admirable for Whitney to do this for her husband. But sadly, allegedly, Bobby Brown started to misbehave after she did. In fact, per gossip on these old Hollywood streets, on their honeymoon, Whitney and Bobby got into a physical fight where he ended up throwing a glass at her and cutting her on her face. And although nobody knows for a fact what this alleged fight was about, it could have been about the rumor that Bobby Brown found out some less than stellar information about his new wife. Because allegedly it is said that soon after their marriage, Bobby found out that Whitney had slept with several producers, directors, and other bigwigs in the music and movie industry. And a lot of people get mad at this rumor, you know, oh, that's ridiculous. Whitney ain't done nothing like that, blah, blah, blah. But to to be honest with you, during this YouTube for the past 5 years, especially in the last 2 years, it is really not that surprising to me if it is found to be true that Whitney did sleep around with these directors and producers and things like that, because as we have seen with these videos, a lot of those starlets had to do that, whether they were musicians or actresses. But to get back to the story, like I said, I don't know if that honeymoon night when they got to fighting is when Bobby found out this information. Could have been. But I do know that allegedly sometime soon after they got married, he did find out about this so-called information. And he became very angry by it. For some reason, he took it as if Whitney had cheated on him. She wasn't even with him when all of this stuff went on. But he took it as if it was some type of slight to him. It hurt his pride. And so because he felt betrayed, allegedly this was the beginning of Bobby Brown's wild streak. And he became a cheater almost immediately. And that is just so wild to me that Bobby could allegedly take what Whitney did before she got with him, when ain't nobody said nothing about the stuff he did before Whitney, because allegedly he had 3 children by 2 different women before he got with Whitney. So she didn't take that as a slight against her. But maybe men are just built different or something. I don't know. But like I said, the folks say Bobby started cheating. And some people like to say that one of the people that Bobby Brown cheated with was Miss Janet Jackson. Now, I personally don't know about that rumor, because I know Bobby Brown and Janet were supposedly messing around before he got with Whitney, but I never heard anything about him cheating on Whitney with Janet Jackson. But some people out here believe firmly that Bobby Brown went back to Janet Jackson a couple of times for some sneaky links when he first got with Whitney. They also feel like he was possibly still messing around with singer Madonna. And that's another one I'm not too sure about, because just like Janet, supposedly Bobby was messing around with Madonna before he got with Whitney. But regardless on if Bobby was cheating with these big name stars on Whitney or not, what is for certain is that he was cheating with regular women, groupies and things like that. And rumor has it Whitney ended up finding out about this cheating, and she was very hurt. And this allegedly is one of those times that she turned to the comfort of Robin Crawford. But gossip claims Bobby found out about it and made Whitney cut Robin off. Like supposedly she had to physically tell Robin that, hey, you can no longer come over to the house anymore. We can still be business partners, maybe even friends, but I can't see you like that anymore. We can't do this anymore. And after Whitney cut Robin off, Bobby was said to have stopped his cheating, and him and Whitney were kind of reconciling. They were starting over fresh, and they were happy. In fact, a little while after them starting over fresh, in September of 1992, Whitney found out she was pregnant with Bobby Christina. So the couple were on happy terms. Very soon they had a beautiful bouncing baby girl. But all of these happy smiles wouldn't last too long, because there had already been an undercurrent of drugs in their relationship. Both Bobby and Whitney like to have a good time, party, snort coke here and there. But now, slowly and surely, there was a rise in this behavior. And they started snorting and doing drugs on a daily basis. Not only were they snorting and getting high, they also were into alcohol and getting drunk. And so this rise in these illicit activities started to chip away at their happiness. And also the fact that Whitney was rising into a global superstar while Bobby's career was kind of fading into the background brought a lot of jealousy into their relationship. And maybe, just maybe, Whitney and Bobby could have beat this thing. They could have made it through. But there was something else that they were battling or about to battle that they had no idea about. The media. You see, when it came to Bobby and Whitney, almost every other day in somebody's magazine or newspaper, there was a constant drip of negative news against Bobby. Bobby was a thug. He was a bad guy. He was a womanizer. He wasn't good enough for Whitney. And honestly, it's almost for certain now that somebody in their camp was actually planting those stories, but we'll get to that a little bit later. But this manipulation of the media and of the public to have this terrible outlook on Bobby caused stress in Whitney and Bobby's marriage. Bobby would end up sometimes even kind of blaming Whitney. The public always looked at me like I was kind of a bad guy or a cool guy, but they never looked at me like a monster until I married you. And Whitney would be stressed to hell because there was nothing she could do. She couldn't call every single publication always defending her husband every hour. And even if she put in a word with the publication that she didn't like it, she couldn't stop them from running their story. And so this stress would cause resentment in their marriage, which would push them both further into drugs and alcoholism. And Bobby, sure enough, didn't need to be using alcohol or drinking because allegedly he would become violent when he got drunk.
Hey y'all, let me break in real quick. Why come I was reading in one of the gossip blogs and somebody talking about one of the reasons that Bobby Brown went upside Whitney Houston head is because she messed with Tupac. Baby, I hollered because I thought it was ridiculous, especially when they were explaining, talking about Bobby was mad because he felt like Whitney thought Tupac was like how Bobby used to be, young, thuggish, handsome, stuff like that. So they were claiming Bobby was upset about that. But I thought the whole thing was ridiculous because, come on, Whitney and Tupac. But baby, why come I got to searching up on the internet and allegedly Bobby Brown really did write in one of his books that Whitney did cheat on him with Tupac. Now, I don't know if Bobby Brown was lying, but I put the rumor in the video because, I don't know, who knows? It might have some legs to it since Bobby writing it in his books and stuff. But anyway, before I pause the video to say this about Whitney and Tupac, I was telling you guys about how the drugs and alcohol were getting worse for Whitney and Bobby. But there were times that they would try to stop it. For instance, sometimes they would try to police each other.
And so moments of sobriety became very few and far between with the couple. But when they would be sober, they both would try to police each other. Whitney would tell Bobby, you're doing too many drugs. Bobby, you're drinking too much. You don't need to drink because it'll change your personality. And then Bobby would go so far as to lock Whitney into the bedroom, telling her, we got a baby now, Whitney. You can't do drugs like that. You can't be high like that. But no matter how much they tried to help each other, they just could not defeat the demon. And over time, they even started using the drugs in front of Bobby Christina. And then somewhere along the line, the drug use upgraded from snorting cocaine to smoking crack. And this is when their behavior really started to become a lot. And then what made matters worse is in the year 1997, Bobby ended up being arrested for a DUI. And after this, there was once again a very big push from Whitney's family to leave Bobby. But instead of leaving Bobby, she actually started to kind of push away from her family. First of all, she felt like they, just like Clive, was trying to control her life. And then she also started to feel like some of them were taking advantage of her financially. And one of the main people Whitney decided to part ways with was her father, John Houston. He had been her manager for a period of time and she ended up firing him. And this became a huge deal between father and daughter and a terrible point of contention. As a matter of fact, John Houston ended up suing Whitney to the tune of $100 million in the year 2002. And so this was another thing to push her further into drug use and further away from her family. And as she was getting away from her own family, she started to gravitate more to Bobby's family. Now it was his side of the family hanging out at their house all the time. Now it was his side of the family going on all of these trips with them. But unfortunately for Whitney, gossip claims this was a terrible move for her to make as well. Because the folks say a lot of Bobby's family members encouraged Whitney's drug use. They would get high with her. They wanted to keep her high because she became friendly financially. She just started throwing money around. And it was actually also around this time period when Whitney was constantly surrounded by Bobby's family. Negative energy seemed to be centered around Bobby Brown. Because between the years of 2004 and 2006, gossip claims Bobby became different. Like he and Whitney had always had their differences, but allegedly he became very evil, very nasty to Whitney. Gossip claims every word out of his mouth to her was a curse word. Allegedly he would kind of frown up and his energy would kind of change whenever she came around. And a lot of calling Whitney stupid. A lot of putting her down. Just completely dark energy. And the folks say at the same time this was going on, Whitney would get high and she would see demons. She would see them coming up through the floors. She would see them coming through the walls. She would even see them in the kitchen cabinets. And very soon, whenever she got high, allegedly she began hitting herself. But when people around her started to ask her, Whitney, what's wrong with you? Why are you doing that? Or where did this bruise come from? Or that cut come from? Whitney would tell them that the devil is beating me up. She would say, I was just walking into the bedroom and the devil hit me. He hit me right on the leg. His demons, they're fighting me. They like to beat me up. But see, I fight them back though, because they ain't here for me. They after Bobby. All those demons and stuff, they trying to get Bobby. And at the time, the people around her thought that she was talking crazy. But what if she wasn't talking crazy? What if there was a real reason that Bobby turned so dark like that? Because on top of the stuff I already mentioned that he was doing in this very dark period, he was getting into fights with other people. And then he started to do some very strange things. And that is when he started painting eyes all around Whitney's bedroom, all on the walls, all on the floor, almost like Bobby was doing some type of symbolism. And this scared Whitney. She knew in her heart that this was not right. Something's wrong. And then he started to cut Whitney's head off in every big family portrait. And when Whitney's side of the family got wind of this, of seeing Whitney live like this is when Sissy showed up to Whitney's house with the sheriff's department and forced Whitney to go into rehab. And even though this probably was a life-saving measure for Whitney Houston at the time, gossip claims she actually was annoyed with Sissy doing this. And really, honestly, the whole time at rehab, gossip claims that Whitney just couldn't wait to get back home to Bobby.
And when she got home, she and Bobby kissed and made up like always, and both of them promised to do better. But unfortunately, Bobby's version of better would ultimately destroy the couple, because very soon after this, he met a guy by the name of Andy Cohen. And Andy Cohen
approached Bobby Brown for a reality show. And Andy Cohen played his cards well. He knew that Bobby Brown felt insecure about his failed music career. He knew Bobby Brown felt insecure about the fact that the world looked at him like he was just a leech. You know what I'm saying? Like he wasn't really a man. He was living off of his wife's coattail. And so Andy Cohen knew that Bobby Brown would accept this chance to have his own reality show, because in Bobby's mind, it would prove that he was the man of his house. And while Whitney was said to be happy for Bobby, she really didn't want anything to do with the reality show. But once she found Bobby struggling to shop the show to different networks, that is when she bugged down and she decided that she would be featured in the reality show. She wanted to support her husband. She did not want to let him down. She wanted to see her husband's dreams soar. But it was a terrible decision. On the reality show, people got to see their erratic behavior. And to be honest with you, it wasn't erratic behavior all the time. Some of that stuff was just normal, Whitney and Bobby having fun together. But the media is always manipulative. It could be Whitney and Bobby singing together, just having fun as a couple, and then they would piece in a clip of Bobby Christina rolling her eyes. You know what I'm saying? She could have been rolling her eyes as something totally different, but the way that they would edit it together would make it seem like Bobby Christina was rolling her eyes at her parents, like she was tired of them being crackheads, tired of them being erratic. And so Bobby, not knowing how the media works or how the reality TV world works for sure, didn't understand that he had essentially set him and Whitney up in a trap. And he also made things worse for himself, because as soon as the public saw this, they blamed Bobby. Lord have mercy, what has that boy done to Whitney? Look how he got her acting. And so it was kind of like everything that the couple was doing, especially Bobby, was the wrong choice.
And gossip claims the stress from this failure brought the evil back onto Bobby tenfold. He was back to allegedly calling Whitney names. Some gossip even claims he was slapping her around. And it was like nothing that she could do would make her husband like her, or treat her well, or want her. Nothing could make him happy. But rumor has it, Whitney just kept right on trying until she found out something that shook her to her core. And that is when she found out While she was at rehab crying and pining for Bobby, he allegedly
brought another woman not only into their home, but into their bed. This right here, she felt the evilness coming from Bobby when it came to this. Bringing somebody into their intimate space, a place that was sacred for them. You know what I'm saying? They had done so much in that bedroom together. You know, that was their little space. So allegedly for him to bring another woman into that space and desecrate it by making love to that other woman, you know, it shattered something in Whitney. And then what really sealed the deal, she also was starting to hear rumors about the Superhead book. Superhead was going around doing interviews or telling people that one of the guys she slept with was Bobby Brown. Right when things were coming up to a head with Bobby acting crazy, Bobby Brown's sister Tina Brown ended up selling pictures of Whitney's drug-infested bathroom to the tabloid. So these things made Whitney Houston mentally check out of the marriage. And so slowly but surely, Whitney was said to have started moving things out of their home. And then she finally filed for a separation in the year 2006, and she left to go to California. But rumor has it, even after the separation and the move to California, Whitney told those closest to her that she was hoping that Bobby would follow her to California. You know, she told those closest to her that if Bobby would have showed up any day while she was in California, she would have stayed with her husband. But Bobby never came. And because he didn't come, Whitney went ahead and proceeded with the divorce. And so this was just a short video on the gossip that I found regarding Whitney and Bobby's relationship. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I will be back with another video soon. Bye.